it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. Harvester of Sorrow by Darius McCorkindale. Andrew stared at the final notice on his desk, the red ink practically screaming at him. His student loans had finally caught up with him, and his part-time job at the campus bookstore was barely covering his rent. He could feel the full weight of his financial burden growing heavier each day. Andrew was a second-year biology major with aspirations of becoming a doctor, and had big dreams but limited means. His parents, supportive but struggling themselves, could only do so much to help. Scrolling through job listings on his laptop, Andrew let out a huge sigh. Most of the opportunities either demanded experience he didn't have or paid too little to make a difference. He leaned back in his creaky chair and was contemplating his dwindling options when a pop-up ad caught his eye. Clinical trial participants needed. Generous compensation. 2 weeks only. Intrigued, Andrew immediately clicked on the link. The trial was being conducted at Zenith Labs, a renowned research facility not too far from his apartment that was known for its cutting-edge medical advancements. The ad promised a substantial payment for just a 2-week commitment. The specifics of the trial were somewhat vague, but it seemed simple enough. Routine medical tests, all expenses paid, and a hefty paycheck at the end. Feeling like he had nothing to lose, Andrew filled out the application form, detailing his medical history and personal information. Nevertheless, he hesitated for a moment before hitting submit. There was a nagging feeling tugging at the back of his mind. Well, he'd known people who'd done this kind of thing, and none had ever had any lasting problems, but there was always a risk. But, well, desperation overshadowed any doubt he had, and within days he received an email confirming his acceptance into the trial. Packing his bags, Andrew couldn't help but feel a modicum of excitement, albeit mixed with anxiety. The facility was located in a remote area, a bus ride's distance, but far enough away from the bustling city life he was used to. As the bus carried him through the winding roads and dense forests, Andrew thought about how this trial could be a turning point. The money would not only cover his overdue bills, but also provide a cushion for the upcoming semester. When the bus finally pulled up to the entrance of Zenith Labs, Andrew was struck by the contrast between its sleek, modern design and the rustic landscape surrounding it. Tall glass windows glinted in the sunlight, and the facility's logo, the stylized letter Z intertwined with a double helix, stood proudly above the main entrance. As he stepped off the bus, Andrew took a deep breath. He knew this was his best chance to get ahead, to alleviate the financial stress that had been suffocating him. Little did he know, the true cost of this decision would soon unfold, turning his hopes of a quick financial fix into a nightmarish fight for survival. Andrew stood at the entrance of Zenith Labs, clutching his duffel bag tightly. A group of about a dozen other participants were gathered around him, all looking equally nervous and hopeful. The bus that had brought them here rumbled away, leaving behind a cloud of dust and a sense of finality. There was no backing out now. Andrew took a deep breath, reminding himself of the hefty paycheck awaiting him at the end of this 2-week stint. Easy money, he thought. Just 2 weeks. A middle-aged woman in a crisp white lab coat approached the group. Her smile was warm and welcoming. "Welcome to Zenith Labs," she greeted. "I'm Dr. Alexandra Hobson. I'll be overseeing your stay here. Please, follow me." As they walked through the facility, Andrew couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. The building's sleek, modern design stood in great contrast to the dense, overgrown forest surrounding it, creating an unsettling atmosphere, as if this place wasn't supposed to be here. Yet on the inside, everything seemed orderly and professional. The hallways were lined with state-of-the-art medical equipment, and the staff they passed all wore friendly expressions. Dr. Hobson led them to a spacious common area, where they were handed keycards to their living quarters. "You'll each have your own room with all the amenities you need," she explained. "Meals will be provided, and you'll also have access to recreational activities during your downtime. Let me assure you that the tests we'll conduct are all routine and non-invasive. If you have any questions or concerns, our staff is here to help." Thank you for your contribution. Andrew settled into his room, which was more comfortable than he'd expected. A plush bed, a flat-screen TV, and a small desk made the space feel almost like a hotel. Next to the bed was a list of instructions for his stay. Welcome to Zenith Labs. To ensure a safe and pleasant stay, please adhere to the following guidelines. 1. Access areas. You are welcome to spend time in the reception area for check-in and general inquiries. Enjoy your meals in the cafeteria, available during designated mealtimes. Relax and unwind in the lounge with provided entertainment options. Maintain your physical health by using the gym equipment available in the exercise room. 2. Participant quarters. Each participant has a private room with a bed, desk, and ensuite bathroom. Please keep your room tidy and report any issues to staff. 3. Restricted areas. No access. Laboratories are restricted to authorized personnel only. Operating theaters and surgical suites, no entry allowed for participants. Pharmacy and drug storage, access is limited to authorized medical staff. Staff offices and meeting rooms. These are private areas for staff use only. 4. Highly restricted zones. Strictly no access. Underground facilities are heavily secured and off-limits to all visitors and participants. Entry to biohazard containment areas are strictly prohibited and monitored. 5. Security measures. Your keycard allows entry to designated safe areas only. Do not attempt to access restricted zones. The facility is under constant surveillance for your safety. Regular patrols are conducted by security personnel. Please comply with their instructions. 6. Daily routine. Follow the structured daily routine, including scheduled medical tests, meals, and recreational activities. Make use of the common areas during your free time, but avoid wandering into restricted zones. You are required to wear your wrist tag at all times. For any questions or assistance, please contact the front desk. Your cooperation ensures a safe and productive stay at Zenith Labs. Okay, so there was nothing particularly worrying there. It all made sense. Indeed, apart from his participation in the trials, it seemed like he would be spending his time in what looked to be a luxurious facility. He unpacked his belongings and decided to explore it. There were, of course, areas that he couldn't access, but from the areas he could walk around, nothing seemed to be amiss. Over the next few days, Andrew underwent a series of elementary medical tests, blood samples, physical exams, and questionnaires. The staff were always friendly and professional, and made the experience feel routine. He spent his free time getting to know the other participants, who, like him, all seemed relieved by how easy everything was. They played games, watched movies, and shared stories about their lives and what circumstances had brought them here. Some of them he already knew from his time as a student. First, there was Lucy, who'd grown up in a small rural town in upstate New York. From a young age, she'd showed a remarkable talent for art, spending hours each day sketching, painting, and creating. Her mother, a single parent and local schoolteacher, had nurtured Lucy's talent despite their financial struggles. Art supplies were a luxury, but Lucy made do with whatever she could find. Charcoal from the fireplace, scraps of paper, even natural dyes made from plants in their backyard. Lucy had met Andrew at a local cafe near the art school. Like Andrew, she was also a scholarship student, was struggling with her finances and was working part-time as a barista. They bonded over their shared experiences of juggling academic pressures and financial difficulties. Lucy often shared her sketches with Andrew, who admired her talent and determination. Their friendship deepened over time, with Lucy becoming a source of inspiration and encouragement to Andrew. Then there was Mark, who hailed from a bustling city in Texas. His family ran a popular restaurant known for its unique fusion cuisine, blending southern comfort food with international flavors. Mark grew up in the kitchen, learning the art of cooking from his parents and grandparents. His passion for culinary arts was evident from a young age, and he dreamed of one day taking over the family business and expanding its reach. Mark and Andrew had also previously met, through a mutual friend at a university event. They quickly bonded over their shared love for creative expression, Mark through cooking and Andrew through his academic pursuits. Mark had often invited Andrew to his dorm to try new dishes, and their friendship grew from there. Mark admired Andrew's dedication to his studies, and Andrew appreciated Mark's passion and zest for life. And finally, there was Sarah, who'd grown up in a quiet suburban neighborhood in the Midwest. Her parents were both academics, and from an early age, she was encouraged to pursue her intellectual interests. Sarah developed a love for literature, often losing herself in the pages of classic novels and poetry. She was a quiet and introspective child, preferring the company of books to the bustling social scenes her peers enjoyed. Sarah and Andrew had met in a literature class they both took as an elective. They bonded over their love of books and often found themselves in deep discussions about their favorite authors and literary theories. Sarah's quiet wisdom and Andrew's analytical mind complemented each other well, forming a strong intellectual and emotional bond between them. However, despite the comfortable surroundings, Andrew and the others couldn't quite shake a lingering sense of unease. The isolation of the facility, surrounded as it was by thick woods, made him feel cut off from the outside world. And while the staff's friendliness was reassuring, there was something inexplicable about them, as though there was something almost too perfect about their demeanor. One night, as Andrew lay in bed, he heard a faint, rhythmic tapping coming from the hallway. He dismissed it as the actions of another participant unable to sleep. But as the days passed, the strange noises and occasional odd behavior from the staff began to increase his feelings of anxiety. Still, he reminded himself of the money. Just 2 weeks, he repeated. It'd all be worth it. Little did he know, the true nature of the clinical trial was about to reveal itself. It didn't take too long before the days at Zenith Labs began to blur together for Andrew. A monotonous routine of medical tests and idle hours. Yet beneath the surface of this apparent normality, a sense of unease was growing inside him. He'd started noticing peculiar behaviors among the staff. Nurses and doctors exchanged cryptic glances and would often whisper in hushed tones. At night, Andrew would lie awake in his perfectly comfortable bed, listening to the almost disturbing sounds that echoed through the hallways. Soft footsteps, distant clattering, and the occasional muffled cry. One evening, during dinner in the common area, Andrew realized someone was missing. He looked around the room, counting heads, and confirmed it. Lucy, the cheerful art student who'd been his erstwhile chess partner, was nowhere to be seen. He asked the staff about her absence, but their responses were vague and dismissive. Oh, she wasn't feeling well, one nurse said with a tight smile. She's resting. But Lucy wasn't the only one. Over the next few days, more participants started disappearing. First, it was Mark, the aspiring chef with a passion for exotic spices. Then Sarah, the quiet bookworm who'd always had her nose in a novel. Each time, the staff offered the same empty reassurances. Illness, early departures, nothing to worry about. None of these explanations eased Andrew's unease, which had now turned into outright fear. Determined to find out what was happening, Andrew devised a plan. Late one night, when the facility was cloaked in silence, he slipped out of his room. Heart-pounding, he navigated the softly lit corridors, careful to avoid the patrolling guards. He reached a door marked restricted access and, after a moment's hesitation, swiped a keycard he'd lifted from a distracted nurse. The door clicked open, revealing a narrow, sterile hallway that led to a series of rooms. Andrew crept forward, glancing to each room through the small rectangular windows in each of the doors. His breath caught in his throat when he saw them. Room after room of unconscious participants, including Lucy, Mark, and Sarah, each lying on gurneys with various medical apparatus attached to their bodies. Their expressions were serene, almost peaceful, but the sight of the surgical tools and bags labeled with the words "harvested organs" told a horrifying story. A wave of nausea washed over Andrew as he backed away from the window, trying to process the grisly scene. He stumbled upon a small office and ducked inside, where he quickly rummaged through the files and documents scattered across the desk. What he found confirmed his worst fears. Detailed records of systemic organ harvesting, signed off by all those doctors who had seemed so friendly and professional. Well, Andrew knew he had to get out and make sure the world knew what was going on in this facility. But as he turned to leave, the door creaked open. He froze, eyes widening as Dr. Hobson stepped into the room. Her friendly smile was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating gaze. "You're not supposed to be here, Andrew," she said, her voice devoid of warmth. Panic surged through him as he pushed past her, sprinting down the hallway. Within seconds, the alarm blared and red lights were flashing as the facility erupted into chaos. Andrew darted through the corridors, his heart pounding in his ears. He managed to find a hiding spot in a storage closet, where he sat in the darkness, struggling to quiet his ragged breathing. Moments later, the sound of approaching footsteps made his heart skip a beat. The door to the storage closet was flung open, and the harsh fluorescent light revealed Dr. Hobson standing in the doorway, her eyes cold and unforgiving. "You've seen too much, Andrew," she said, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. "I'd hoped it wouldn't come to this, but you've left me with no choice." Andrew stood up, his fists clenched. "I won't let you get away with this. People will find out. They'll stop you." Dr. Hobson shook her head slowly, almost pityingly. "Well, you're so naive. Zenith Labs has connections in places you can't even imagine. The authorities, the media, they're all under our influence. Your little escape attempt has only served to expose the few remaining threats to our operation." Andrew felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. "No," he said, his voice trembling with defiance. "I'll find a way. I'll expose you." Andrew caught Dr. Hobson staring at his wrist tag. This is how she'd found his hiding spot so quickly. She took a step closer, her expression hardening. "I'm afraid we can't allow that, Andrew. You've become a liability, and liabilities must be eliminated." With a sudden, desperate surge of adrenaline, Andrew lunged at Dr. Hobson. The two struggled violently, knocking over shelves and scattering medical supplies across the floor. Andrew fought with every ounce of strength he had left, knowing that his life depended on it. Dr. Hobson was surprisingly strong, her hands clawing at Andrew as they grappled. She managed to pull a syringe from her pocket, the needle glinting menacingly in the flickering light. Andrew's eyes widened as he realized her intent. Summoning all his remaining energy, Andrew twisted Dr. Hobson's wrist, forcing her to drop the syringe. It clattered to the floor, rolling under a cabinet. Dr. Hobson let out a furious scream and tried to reach for it, but Andrew seized the moment, grabbed a heavy metal tray from a nearby shelf and swung it with all his might, striking Dr. Hobson on the side of her head. She crumpled to the ground, unconscious or worse. Andrew didn't wait to find out. Gasping for breath, he stumbled out of the storage closet and into the chaotic hallway, discarding his wrist tag as he did. Within seconds, the alarm blared again, red lights flashing as the facility erupted into chaos. Andrew darted through the corridors, his heart pounding in his ears. He managed to find a hiding spot in a storage closet, where he sat in the darkness, struggling to quiet his ragged breathing. Paranoia set in as he waited, every creak and footstep outside the door heightening his fear. Well, he could trust no one, not the staff, not the participants who hadn't disappeared yet. Anyone could be complicit in this nightmarish scheme. Andrew knew he had to escape, but with every exit guarded and the whole facility on high alert, his options were limited. Desperately, he began to formulate a new plan, one that would take every ounce of cunning and courage he had left. Part 2. Andrew crouched in the dark storage closet, his mind racing. He clutched a folder he'd grabbed from the office. It was filled with damning evidence, names, dates, procedures, and even photographs documenting the organ harvesting operation. It was undeniable proof of the facility's gruesome activities. But now the stakes were higher than ever. He knew he had to get out before he became the next name on their list. The blaring alarm finally ceased, replaced by a sinister silence. Andrew slowly cracked the closet door open and peered into the hallway. It was deserted for the moment, but he knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. He needed a plan, and fast. Andrew decided to head back to his room first. The other participants, if they were still around, would be monitored, but his absence might not be noticed yet. He moved swiftly and silently, his senses on high alert. When he reached his room, he found it untouched. He grabbed his backpack and stuffed the incriminating folder inside, then packed a few essentials: water, energy bars, and a small flashlight. He was sure he knew the facility's layout well enough by now, having spent days wandering its corridors. His best bet was to head for the loading docks, where supplies were delivered. If he could slip out and find help, he could bring back the authorities and expose the horrors of Zenith Labs. Andrew took a deep breath and headed back into the hallway. He moved quickly, sticking to the shadows and avoiding the main corridors. As he approached the loading docks, he heard footsteps and ducked into an alcove. 2 guards passed by, their conversation confirming Andrew's worst fears. They're up in security. That kid's seen too much, one guard muttered. Yeah, Dr. Hobson wants him found. Last thing we need is a loose end, the other replied. Andrew's heart pounded in his chest. He waited until the guards were out of sight before continuing. The loading dock was just ahead, its large metal doors looming like a beacon of hope. He crept closer, sticking to the periphery, and spotted a small side door that was ajar, likely left open by a careless staff member. Andrew slipped through the door and found himself in a storage area filled with crates and medical supplies. He moved toward the main dock area, where a delivery truck was parked. As he approached, he heard voices, workers unloading the latest shipment. He needed to wait for the right moment. The workers finished their task and began to leave, giving Andrew enough time to seize the opportunity. He darted towards the truck and climbed inside. Hiding behind a stack of boxes, he pulled the tarp over himself, creating a makeshift hiding spot. He could hear the engine start, and the truck began to move. Andrew's pulse quickened. He was almost free. The truck rumbled along the gravel road leading away from the facility, and he dared to hope that he might actually make it out. After what felt like an eternity, the truck came to a stop. Andrew waited, listening for any sign of movement. When he was sure it was safe, he emerged from his hiding spot and cautiously climbed out. He found himself at a gas station several miles from the facility. He looked around, the harsh fluorescent lights of the station illuminating the deserted area. He approached the payphone outside the station, his hands trembling as he dialed the emergency number. 911, what's your emergency? Andrew took a deep breath. I need to report a medical facility that's harvesting organs. People are in danger. Please, send help. As he provided the details, he felt a sense of relief. He'd escaped Zenith Labs, but he knew this wasn't the end of his ordeal. He needed to stay vigilant and out of sight until help arrived. The facility's reach was long, and he couldn't be sure how far their influence extended. Andrew hung up the phone and found a hiding spot near the gas station, where he could watch for the authorities. He clutched the backpack containing the folder tightly, knowing that the evidence he held was his only hope of bringing down the monstrous operation he'd narrowly escaped. Andrew paced back and forth anxiously near the gas station, his eyes scanning the darkened road for any sign of approaching help. The minutes felt like hours, and every sound made him jump. He knew he couldn't stay exposed for long. The reach of Zenith Labs was extensive, and their ability to track down escapees was probably highly efficient. Just as he started to doubt whether the authorities would come in time, he heard the unmistakable sound of an approaching vehicle. His relief was short-lived. The vehicle that pulled up was not a police car, but a sleek black SUV. Andrew's stomach dropped. He recognized the emblem on the door: Zenith Labs. They'd found him. Panicking, Andrew bolted from his hiding spot, sprinting towards the dense woods behind the gas station. He heard shouts behind him and the pounding of footsteps as the pursuers gave chase. Branches whipped his face and arms as he tore through the undergrowth, adrenaline surging through his veins. Well, he didn't know how long he'd run before he stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin. He darted inside, slamming the door behind him and quickly barricading it with a rickety chair and a rusty table. His mind raced as he scanned the room for anything he could use as a weapon. Spotting a heavy iron poker by the long-dead fireplace, he grabbed it and positioned himself near the door, trying to steady his breathing. He'd hardly had any time to even position himself before the door burst open with a crash, splintering the flimsy barricade. 2 men in lab coats, flanked by a guard in black tactical gear, stormed in. Andrew was ready and swung the poker with all his might, connecting with the guard's arm, sending his weapon skittering across the floor. The guard retaliated, striking Andrew in the ribs and sending him crashing to the ground. Pain exploded in Andrew's side, but he forced himself to roll away, narrowly avoiding a stomp aimed at his head. He scrambled to his feet, grabbing a jagged piece of wood from the shattered door. With a desperate cry, he lunged at the nearest man in a lab coat, driving the splintered wood into his shoulder. The man screamed, blood spurting from the wound, and he collapsed. The remaining man and the guard closed in. Their expressions were grim. Andrew backed away, eyes darting around the cabin looking for anything else to defend himself with. He spotted an old gas lantern on a shelf and a box of matches. Seizing the lantern, he smashed it on the ground between him and his attackers, the liquid inside igniting instantly. Flames roared to life, creating a barrier of fire. The guard hesitated, trying to find a way around the flames, and Andrew took his chance. He bolted for the back door of the cabin, crashing through it and into the night. He ran blindly, the sounds of pursuit growing fainter as the fire spread, consuming the old wood of the cabin. His chest heaved with exertion, and every breath caused a stab of pain from his injured ribs. He knew he couldn't keep this up much longer. He needed a plan. A final stand. Ahead, he saw the outline of an old barn. He veered towards it, praying it would offer some means of defense. Inside the barn, Andrew quickly scanned his surroundings. He found a ladder leading up to a hayloft and climbed it, pulling the ladder up behind him. He crouched in the shadows, peering through the gaps in the wooden walls. Moments later, the guard and the man in the lab coat burst into the barn, flashlights slicing through the darkness. Andrew held his breath, watching as they moved cautiously through the ground level. His eyes fell on a heavy pulley system used for lifting bales of hay. An idea formed in his mind, desperate and dangerous. He slowly and silently moved to the edge of the loft, positioning himself over the pulley. With a swift, decisive movement, Andrew kicked the lever, sending the pulley swinging down. It struck the guard, knocking him to the ground with a sickening thud. The man in the lab coat looked up in shock, and Andrew took his chance, leaping down from the loft and tackling him to the floor. Well, a fierce struggle ensued, both men grappling and rolling in the dirt. Andrew fought with every ounce of strength he had left, his survival instinct overpowering the pain and exhaustion. He managed to wrestle the man's flashlight away, using it to strike his head. The man went limp, unconscious, or worse. Gasping for breath, Andrew staggered to his feet. He grabbed the guard's radio and called for help. His voice was trembling but determined. "This is Andrew Matthews. I've escaped from Zenith Labs. They're harvesting organs. I have proof. Send help to the old barn on Route 9. He didn't wait for a response. He knew he had to keep moving, to stay ahead of any more pursuers. But for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope. He'd fought back and survived. Now he had to stay alive long enough to see justice done. As Andrew emerged from the barn, the first light of dawn was casting a pale glow over the desolate landscape. His body ached with every step, but the thought of his friends, the other participants, spurred him on. He knew he couldn't leave without at least trying to free them. He tried to retrace his steps through the woods, making his way back to Zenith Labs, hoping to find a way in without being detected. As he approached the facility from the rear, he noticed a maintenance entrance partially concealed by overgrown shrubs. He slipped inside, moving quietly through the weakly lit corridors. The building was strangely quiet, while the staff were likely preoccupied with the chaos caused by the fire at the cabin. Andrew navigated the familiar hallways until he reached the hidden wing where he'd first discovered the organ harvesting operation. His heart pounded as he peeked through the small windows of the rooms, finding several participants still unconscious on gurneys, hooked up to various medical apparatus. Determined, he entered the nearest room and began disconnecting the equipment from Lucy, the art student he'd befriended. Lucy's eyes fluttered open, confusion giving way to fear as she recognized Andrew. "What's happening?" she whispered. "No time to explain," Andrew replied urgently. "We have to get out of here." He helped her to her feet, supporting her unsteady steps as best he could. He then moved on to the next room, repeating the process with Mark and Sarah. Soon they had a small group of freed participants, all of them dazed but willing to follow Andrew's lead. He led them through the facility, avoiding the main corridors and slipping through side passages. Just as they reached the maintenance entrance, an alarm blared and red lights began flashing. The facility was onto them. "Run!" Andrew shouted, pushing the group forward. They sprinted through the woods, the tree branches scratching at their skin and the sounds of pursuit growing louder behind them. Andrew's heart pounded with fear. He glanced back, seeing the dark shapes of the guards closing in on them. The group burst through the tree line and onto a dirt road. Andrew spotted a passing truck and waved frantically. The driver, an elderly man with kind eyes, slammed on the brakes. "Please, help us," Andrew pleaded, his voice desperate. The driver took one look at their ragged state and nodded. "Get in, quick." They piled into the truck and the driver sped off, leaving the guards behind in a cloud of dust. Andrew slumped against the seat, exhaustion finally catching up with him. But he knew their ordeal wasn't over yet. They had to get to safety and expose the horrors they'd witnessed. The driver took them to the nearest town, dropping them off at the police station. Andrew, clutching the backpack and the folder of evidence, stumbled inside and demanded to speak with the chief. Upon seeing the group's condition, the officers quickly ushered them in. While they waited, Andrew used the station's phone to contact a major news outlet. He briefly explained the situation, emphasizing the urgency and detailing the damning evidence he possessed. The reporter on the other end promised to send a team immediately. When the police chief arrived, Andrew laid out the folder, listing the horrific practices at Zenith Labs. The chief's eyes widened with each piece of evidence, and he immediately called for reinforcements to raid the facility. Within hours, the police and the media descended upon Zenith Labs, so Andrew was informed. The authorities were said to have stormed the building and arrested the staff in securing the safety of the remaining participants. The police chief said that the media captured everything, broadcasting the shocking story to the world. The fallout would be immediate and no doubt devastating for the facility. Investigations would be launched, and the evidence Andrew had gathered would lead to multiple arrests and the ultimate shutdown of Zenith Labs. The police chief assured him that the survivors were given medical attention and support, and their stories were finally heard. Andrew sat alone in an office at the station, emotions of relief and exhaustion washing over him. He'd done it. He'd faced the nightmare and emerged victorious. As Andrew sat in the office, the tension in his shoulders was finally beginning to ease. He slowly sipped on the drink the police chief had offered him, having thanked Andrew for his contribution. Participants he'd rescued were receiving medical attention, and the authorities had assured him that Zenith Labs would be thoroughly investigated. For the first time in days, he allowed himself to relax, believing that the nightmare was finally over. But as he leaned back in his chair, a sharp, searing pain suddenly shot through his abdomen. He doubled over, gasping for breath. The room around him blurred, voices melding into an indistinguishable roar. He tried to call out for help, but his voice was swallowed by the intense agony tearing through his body. His vision darkened, and he collapsed to the floor, consciousness slipping away. Andrew awoke to the beeping of medical monitors. His eyes fluttered open, and he found himself lying in a hospital bed, the sterile smell of antiseptic filling his nostrils. Panic set in as he recognized his surroundings. He was back at Zenith Labs. Struggling to sit up, he noticed the familiar face of Dr. Hobson standing at the foot of his bed. Her expression was cold and calculating. "Welcome back, Andrew," she said, her voice devoid of the false warmth it once held. Andrew's heart raced as he looked around the room, realizing the horrifying truth. He wasn't free. He'd never truly escaped. How did this happen?" he croaked, his voice weak. Dr. Hobson's smile was chilling. "Did you really think you could escape us? Zenith Labs has connections everywhere. The authorities you contacted, the media, they're all part of our network. Your little escape was orchestrated from the beginning. We needed to identify potential threats and ensure no one ever truly gets away." Andrew's blood ran cold. "The evidence, the police, the raid—" "Carefully crafted illusion," Dr. Hobson interrupted. "We allowed it to happen to see who might pose a risk to our operations. And you, Andrew, have proven to be quite the threat." He tried to move, but his limbs felt heavy and unresponsive. He glanced down and saw that he was restrained to the bed. Panic surged through him as he realized the extent of his predicament. "You can't do this," he gasped. "People know. They'll come looking for me." Dr. Hobson shook her head slowly. "Oh, Andrew, you underestimate our reach. By the time anyone starts asking questions, it'll be too late. You'll be just another unfortunate casualty, a victim of your own reckless actions." As she spoke, a team of surgeons and nurses entered the room, preparing the instruments for the upcoming procedure. Andrew's eyes widened in horror as they approached, their faces devoid of any empathy or remorse. "You can't do this," he screamed, struggling against the restraints. "Please, no." Dr. Hobson leaned in close, her cold breath brushing against his ear. "Goodbye, Andrew. Thank you for your contribution." The last thing Andrew saw was the glint of a scalpel under the harsh surgical lights. As the anesthesia took hold, he felt a profound sense of helplessness. The world faded to black, and Andrew knew his fate was sealed. In the end, Zenith Labs had ensured that no one ever truly escaped their grasp. The facility continued its operations, harvesting organs from unwilling donors, hidden behind a veil of legitimacy and power. And Andrew, once a hopeful student with dreams of a better future, became just another name on their list. So there's another Darius McCorkindale original for you, for your Sunday evening's pleasure. I hope it was pleasurable. Anyway, yeah, had something longer planned, but visitors, barbecue and stuff kind of it's going to take up a lot of my Sunday. So I had that one on the go, and I quite enjoyed the whole premise, and I think it worked out pretty well. I killed off the protagonist in the end. Did you notice? Yeah, I've been doing that a lot recently. Anyway, waffling on a bit. Hope you're enjoying your weekend. I will be going off to enjoy mine in a different way now. So, all the best, my dear friends. Till the next time, very, very sweet dreams, and bye-bye. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, Hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams. Bye-bye.